Let's start with assumption. Close your eyes and do this with me. Assume everything is fine. Assume you have everything you want. Assume they love you. Assume the money is coming. You tried it. You assumed, you felt it. You pushed yourself to believe. And you woke up to the same life, the same bills, the same silence where that person's voice should have been, the same number in your bank account, the same feeling of being completely stuck. So naturally, one question came. If this law is so powerful, why hasn't my life changed? That question matters, because the answer is the one thing nobody told you. You were taught the surface. You were told to visualize, to affirm, to feel good, to picture the life you want and wait for it to arrive. And when it didn't come, you were told you didn't believe enough. Your vibration was off. Try harder, feel more, go deeper, and that made everything worse, because now it was your fault. Now you were the problem, and you carried that weight on top of everything else you were already carrying. But here is the truth. The real truth. You were not doing it wrong. You were doing the wrong thing altogether. Visualization is not the law. Affirmations are not the law. Feeling good is not the law. These are tools, and tools without understanding are just noise. The actual law, the one underneath all of this, is the law of assumption, and it has nothing to do with what you think. It has everything to do with what you believe about yourself at a level so deep you don't even know it's there. Let me explain this slowly, because this is where everything changes. Right now, in this moment, you are holding assumptions, not thoughts, not wishes. Assumptions about who you are, about what you deserve, about how people treat you, about what is possible for someone like you. These assumptions are not things you decided consciously. They were formed over years, through experiences, through pain, through the things people said to you when you were too young to question them, through the patterns that repeated so many times they started to feel like facts, and now they live inside you as the quiet truth of who you are. You don't think them, you don't say them out loud, you just carry them like the weight of something you forgot you were holding. And here is where the law comes in. Your subconscious mind, the part of you that runs 95% of your life, does not respond to your wishes. It does not respond to your prayers. It does not respond to your affirmations. It responds to your assumptions. Whatever you assume to be true about yourself, your subconscious accepts as a fact, not a possibility, not a goal, a fact. And it works every single moment of every single day to make that fact your reality. This is not a theory. This is not spiritual guesswork. This is how the mind actually operates. Think about this for a moment. You know someone who always seems to struggle, no matter what they try, no matter how hard they work. Something always goes wrong. Opportunities disappear, relationships fall apart. Money slips through their fingers. Now think about what they believe about themselves, not what they say, what they actually believe. Deep down, in the quiet, there it is, the assumption underneath all the struggle. And now think about someone who seems to move through life differently. Things work out for them. Doors open, people show up at the right time, life bends in their direction. Is it luck? Sometimes, but look deeper. Look at what they expect from life. Look at the quiet certainty they carry that things will work for them. That assumption is not a coincidence. That assumption is the cause. This is the law of assumption, not what you hope for, not what you visualize for 10 minutes in the morning. What you assume. Constantly. Underneath everything. At the level of identity. And this is why nothing changed when you tried before. Because you were trying to change the fruit without touching the root. You were trying to manifest a different life while still holding the same assumption about who you are inside that life. You were trying to attract love while somewhere deep down assuming you are someone who gets left. You were trying to attract money while somewhere underneath assuming that security is not really for you. You were trying to build a new life on top of an old identity. And it doesn't work. It cannot work. Because the assumption always wins. Always. The assumption is the instruction your subconscious follows, and until that instruction changes, the output cannot change. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much you want it, no matter how many times you visualize, the assumption is the foundation. And right now, whether you realize it or not, your entire life is built on it. Every pattern that keeps repeating, every door that keeps closing, every relationship that feels the same. Every time you get close to something good and then watch it fall apart. That is not bad luck. That is an assumption running so deep, you never thought to question it. But here is what changes everything. An assumption that was formed can be replaced. Not fought, not suppressed, not covered with positive thinking, replaced at the root, at the level where it actually lives. And when the assumption changes at that level, the life changes. Not eventually, not slowly over years. At the root, because a tree whose roots have changed grows differently. Fruits differently, stands differently in every storm that comes. You are not here to manage your circumstances. You are here to change what you assume about yourself, and that is exactly what this is going to show you. So let's talk about what an assumption actually is. Not the dictionary definition, not the philosophical version, the real version, the one that is quietly running your life right now. An assumption is not a thought you think once. An assumption is a truth you hold in your bones. It is the thing you believe without deciding to believe it. It is the feeling underneath all your other feelings, the quiet certainty that says, this is who I am. This is what I get. This is what life looks like for me. You didn't choose it consciously. Nobody sits down one day and decides, I am going to assume I am not enough. I am going to assume love always leaves. I am going to assume I will never have real security. Nobody chooses that. It gets chosen for you by experience, by repetition, by the moment something painful happened and your mind made a decision about what that meant. About you, about the world, about what to expect from now on. And that decision became an assumption. And that assumption became your reality. Over and over again. In different situations, with different people. But always the same pattern. Because the assumption was always the same underneath. This is what people miss. They think their problems are different each time. Different person, different situation, different failure. But look at the pattern. Look at what keeps repeating. That repetition is not bad luck. That repetition is the assumption proving itself right again and again and again. Your subconscious mind is not trying to hurt you. It is trying to be consistent. It is trying to confirm what it already believes to be true, because consistency feels safe to the mind. Even when what it is being consistent about is painful. Even when what it keeps confirming is the very thing destroying your life. The mind would rather be right about something painful than be uncertain about something good. Read that again. The mind would rather be right about something painful than be uncertain about something good. This is why people stay stuck. Not because they are weak, not because they don't want better, but because somewhere deep inside, the assumption of being stuck feels more familiar than the possibility of being free. Familiarity feels like truth, and the mind clings to what feels like truth, even when it is a lie. Even when it is a lie that has cost you everything. Now here is where the law of assumption becomes the most important thing you will ever understand. If your subconscious holds an assumption as truth, it will arrange your perception, your decisions, your behavior, your entire experience of reality to match that assumption. Not because the world is against you, because your mind is filtering everything through the lens of what it already believes. Think about this. Two people walk into the same room, same people inside. Same opportunities available. One person walks in assuming they belong there, assuming people will receive them well, assuming something good will come from this. The other person walks in assuming they will be judged, assuming they don't quite fit, assuming nothing ever really works out for them. They leave that same room with completely different experiences. Not because the room was different, because the assumption was different, and the assumption changed everything. What they noticed, what they said, how they carried themselves, who approached them, what doors opened, what doors stayed closed. same room. Completely different realities. This is the law of assumption working in real time, not in theory, in your actual daily life, every single day. And now I want you to think about something that might be uncomfortable. The assumption you are carrying, right now, the one about who you are, about what you deserve, about what is possible for you. Where did it come from? Because it did not come from nowhere. It came from somewhere. Someone said something. Something happened. Something repeated enough times that your mind accepted it as fact. Maybe it was a parent who never made you feel enough. Maybe it was a relationship that ended in a way that told you love always leaves. Maybe it was failure after failure until your mind quietly decided that success was for other people. Maybe it was so gradual you never even noticed it happening. But somewhere along the way, an assumption was planted, and it grew into every area of your life. Into your relationships, into your finances, into the way you walk into a room, into the way you respond when something good starts to happen, into the way you self-sabotage right at the edge of something better. That is the assumption, protecting itself. Keeping your life consistent with what it believes to be true. And here is the most important thing I will say to you today. You cannot affirmation your way out of a deep assumption. You cannot visualize your way past it. You cannot think positive thoughts on top of it and expect it to crumble. Because the assumption lives deeper than thought. It lives at the level of identity, at the level of what you feel yourself to be, not what you want to be, not what you are trying to be, what you feel yourself to be, right now, in the quiet, when no one is watching. When you are alone with yourself at the end of the day, that feeling, that is the assumption, and that is the only thing that actually needs to change, not your habits, not your routine, not your environment. The assumption, because when the assumption changes, everything else changes automatically. The habits shift, the decisions shift, the way people treat you shifts, the opportunities you notice shift, the entire experience of your life shifts, from the inside out, not from the outside in. This is what Neville Goddard was trying to tell the world. He called it living in the end, not visualizing the end, not hoping for the end, living in it, feeling it as already true, assuming it with the same quiet certainty that you assume the sun will rise tomorrow. You don't hope the sun will rise. You don't visualize it rising. You simply know it, without doubt, without effort, without forcing yourself to believe. You just know. That is the quality of assumption that changes a life, not the desperate kind, not the forced kind, not the kind where you are white-knuckling your way through affirmations. Shopping, something will shift. The quiet kind, the certain kind, the kind that settles into your bones and changes how you move through the world without you even trying. That is what you are building toward. Not a technique, not a practice. A new assumption about who you are, a new truth held so deeply that your subconscious has no choice but to build a life around it. Because that is what it has always done, that is what it will always do. The only question is, what assumption are you giving it to work with? The old one that was handed to you, the one built from pain and repetition and other people's limitations, or a new one? One you choose, one that reflects not who you were told you are, but who you actually are. At the deepest level, underneath all the conditioning, underneath all the years, underneath everything that was layered on top of you before you were old enough to say, wait, that is not true. That is not who I am. That moment is now, and what comes next is how you actually do it. So now you understand what the assumption is. You understand where it came from. You understand why it keeps repeating. But now comes the part that actually matters. How do you change it? And I need you to listen carefully here, because this is where most people get it wrong. Again, they hear that the assumption needs to change, and they immediately try to force it. They start saying things they don't believe. They start performing a version of confidence they don't feel. They fake it. They push it. They try to convince themselves of something while every cell in their body is saying the opposite. And it doesn't work because you cannot force an assumption into existence. An assumption is not something you perform, it is something you inhabit. There is a difference, a massive difference. Performing is on the surface. Inhabiting is in the bones. And your subconscious does not respond to performance. It responds to what you actually inhabit, what you actually feel yourself to be. In the quiet, when the performance stops. So the question is not how do you force a new assumption. The question is how do you actually become it? And the answer begins with one thing. Awareness. Not the kind of awareness where you sit and analyze yourself for hours. Simple awareness, the kind where you start to notice. Just notice. What am I actually assuming right now? Not what do I want to assume. What am I actually assuming? About this situation. About this person. About myself in this moment. Because you cannot change something you cannot see. And most people have never actually looked at their assumptions. They have looked at their circumstances. They have looked at their results. They have looked at what other people are doing, but they have never sat quietly and asked, what am I assuming underneath all of this? That question alone will change things. Because the moment you see the assumption clearly, it loses some of its power over you. It stops feeling like the truth. It starts feeling like what it actually is. A belief that was formed under circumstances that no longer exist. A decision the mind made a long time ago to protect you from something that is no longer a threat. And when you see it that way, something shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but something loosens. Something that was held very tightly begins to release. And in that space, a new assumption can begin to take root. Now here is how you plant it. You do not plant it with words. You do not plant it with affirmations repeated in the mirror. You plant it with feeling, specifically the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the feeling of already being the person you want to be. Not imagining it from the outside, not picturing it like a movie you are watching, feeling it from the inside, the way it would actually feel to already be that version of you. The version who is loved, the version who is secure, the version who walks into a room with quiet certainty, the version who does not beg for what they want because they already know they have it. How does that person feel in their body? Not what do they have. How do they feel? That feeling, that internal state, that is the new assumption. And when you hold it consistently, when you return to it again and again, not forcing it, not performing it, but genuinely inhabiting it, your subconscious begins to accept it as the new truth. And when the subconscious accepts it as truth, it begins to build your reality around it. This is not instant, but it is inevitable. Because the subconscious always builds around what it holds as true. Always, without exception. And this is the part I need you to sit with. You have been living inside an assumption for years, maybe decades, and that assumption has been building your reality with the same consistency, the same certainty, the same quiet inevitability. The only difference now is that you are going to choose the assumption. Instead of inheriting it, instead of carrying something that was never yours to begin with, you are going to choose it. Deliberately, consciously, with full understanding of what you are doing and why it works. And I want to be honest with you about something. This will feel uncomfortable at first. The new assumption will feel unfamiliar. It will feel like you are pretending. It will feel like you are lying to yourself. And that discomfort is not a sign that it is not working. That discomfort is a sign that it is. Because discomfort means the new assumption is rubbing against the old one. It means something is shifting. It means the roots are beginning to change. Stay with it, not with force, with patience, with the quiet certainty of someone who understands the law. Who knows that the inside always creates the outside? Who knows that the assumption always wins? And who has decided finally to choose the assumption that wins in their favor? There is something else you need to understand. The world will test you. It always does. You will hold the new assumption, and the old circumstances will still be there. The bills will still be there. The silence will still be there. The evidence of the old assumption will still be right in front of you. And the mind will say, "See, nothing has changed. This doesn't work. Go back." And this is the moment that separates the people who transform from the people who stay stuck. Not talent, not intelligence, not some special gift. Just this moment. The choice to hold the new assumption in the presence of the old evidence. To look at the circumstances and refuse to let them define what you assume about yourself. To say quietly, without drama, without performance, this is not my permanent reality. This is the old assumption finishing its cycle. The new one has already begun. That is faith, not religious faith, psychological faith. The understanding that the inner always precedes the outer, that the root always precedes the fruit, that the assumption always comes before the evidence always, and the person who can hold that understanding in the presence of contradictory circumstances is the person whose life will change completely, permanently, from the inside out. So let me ask you something. Who would you be if you had never been told you were not enough? Who would you be if the pain had never planted that assumption inside you? Who would you be if you had grown up knowing, deeply knowing, that you were worthy of love, of success, of peace, of a life that actually feels like yours? That person, the one you just felt for a moment. That is not a fantasy. That is not a version of you that is out of reach. That is who you actually are, underneath every assumption that was layered on top of you. That is the truth of you, before the world told you otherwise. And the law of assumption is not asking you to become someone new. It is asking you to return to someone real, to strip away the assumptions that were never yours, to stop living inside a story that someone else wrote for you. And to begin, quietly, certainly, powerfully, to live inside the truth of who you actually are. That is the law, not a trick, not a technique, not a shortcut, a return to the self that was always there, waiting, underneath all the noise, underneath all the pain, underneath all the years of assuming the wrong things about the right person, you. The work begins now. Not tomorrow, not when the circumstances change, not when you feel ready. Now, in this moment, with the assumption you choose to hold from this point forward. Choose it carefully, hold it quietly, return to it constantly, and watch, just watch, what your life becomes when the assumption finally changes.